I really enjoyed this album. What sounds like a throwback to a certain neo-psychedelia or indie rock of the 2000s. Sometimes it reminds me of Modest Mouse circa 2000, sometimes it reminds me of Animal Collective circa 2009. It's an interesting piece of work. It sounds very modern, but also like a decisive attempt to be what might now be considered a few years retro. This style of music, this hyperactive indie pop, indie tronica, there you go, that was kind of abundant throughout the early to mid 2010s, and then it was kind of considered a bit passe. Lil Ugly Mane's decided that this is what he wants to do, and it's some of the more interesting and compelling songwriting. Even some of the lyrics I was quite taken with of these particular recordings. I was extremely pleasantly surprised because I was really taken with the release. I believe in Access, the 2015 album. Some of the stuff on there, like there's a computerized voice doing the spoken word. Well, kind of it's rhythmic, but there's a spoken word. That sounds like a computer text to speech. But God, some of the tracks on there were gnarly. This is a completely different recording, but it's a lot of fun. I'm thoroughly impressed, and I'd recommend giving it a go. Give it, if you're so inclined, give it 3 tracks before you dismiss it. That's what I'll say. And I think I ought to give some background on who Little Ugly Mane is. One, Travis Miller, born May 13th, 1984, is an American rapper, singer, and record producer from Richmond, Virginia. He's recorded under multiple aliases in various genres since his first known released project in 2005, including Little Ugly Mane, Sean Kemp, Woodmark, and Bedwetter. Miller rose to popularity in the early 2010s with an experimental approach to southern hip-hop. His debut album, Mr. Fug Isolation, gained him notoriety in the underground hip-hop scene. Since then, he has experimented with a number of styles within and outside the hip-hop genre, most recently releasing the, of course, indie rock album, Volcanic, Bird Enemy, and The Voiced Concern. Sounds like an odd attempt at a rock opera pastiche, like there was a bunch of those in the 90s, Melancholy, Infinite Sadness, or that disgusting Limp Bizkit thing. His other works span genres include instrumental and abstract hip-hop, black metal, free jazz, and noise music. I actually don't just want to read out the entirety of the Wikipedia article, like I could. Instead, I'll read out the Rate Your Music reviews that came out on the day that this album was released, October 12th, 2021, from Duncan Reviews. Everybody's favourite anti-hero has drowned in a wishing well. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. After 6 long years of relatively minimal communication, Travis Miller has suddenly released an all-new Lil Ugly Mane album that has been designed specifically with the objective to blow minds into top favourite lists and to spark discussion of what heights genre fusion can truly be taken to. Whatever angle it is observed from, Volcanic, Bird Enemy, and The Voiced Concern is incredibly surreal, a drug-addled trip through a wonderland of one's own subliminal creation that jumps from floral whistles of woozy psychedelia to rambling monologues of righteous introspection to alcohol-soaked daydreams of a fresh start. There is no hip-hop to be found on this project whatsoever, evolving Little Ugly Mane several steps further than the mental breakdown that occurred within 2015's Oblivion Access, and exploring foreign soil in both an instrumental and lyrical sense. If his last full-length record witnessed the convulsions of a perpetual panic attack, Volcanic, Bird Enemy, and The Voiced Concern documents a stage where Little Ugly Mane is completely crossed over into the ravines of hallucinogenic mania. This is especially true for the production on each of these 19 songs, which jump from style to style as if pointing out individual shapes and figures on an art museum mosaic at random and mashing all of them together by hand. Some tracks sound like old-school Disney tunes that have been waterboarded in Ava, and others boomerang off the asylum walls of suffocating sample manipulation, like an alien trying to break free of human custody. Volcanic, Bird Enemy, and The Voiced Concern surrounds Travis Miller's crumpled form with demented children's show scenes and characters, and the project's songwriting as a whole details the finer reflections in the midst of a psychotic break at rock bottom. Little Ugly Mane is back, and his new masterpiece is about as far from a return to form as it can be. From one, the boy Baz, after a decade and a half of releasing music to try to avoid himself, pseudonym on pseudonym, character on character, style after style, Ugly Mane finally just looks into himself. He got close with Bedwetter, but it was still hidden by facade. This album is pure truth, pure life on wax. Ugly Mane's truth, Travis Miller's truth. And yes, he's still using the Ugly Mane persona, but it doesn't mean anything anymore. He doesn't even credit himself with it, or even Sean Kemp. Most artists couldn't have done it, Most artists couldn't have spent years and years knees deep in the avant-garde and then suddenly find notoriety in Memphis rap revival of all things. Most artists couldn't have then started making some of the most experimental rap out and gotten away with it. Most artists couldn't have then shifted to a sound that's an unplaceable and unparalleled combination of hypnagogic pop and 90s alt-rock and trip-hop and dream-pop and gotten away with it. Most artists wouldn't even have time to think if that would be good for them. Most artists wouldn't have ended up releasing what is probably their best work. Nobody else could pull this off. Nobody else could pull off this drunken, lethargic trip through dreams and nightmares, invaded by children's cartoons and ghosts of the past. I don't even know how he even began to come up with this, let alone see it come to fruition. These lyrics, every line is unexplainably but effortlessly poetic, and most act as a counterpoint to the previous. They make lines, situations, observations that would be mundane elsewhere endlessly profound. It all just makes so much sense, and I don't know how. And it finds so much solace in its more straightforward moments, like on Cursor, probably the best track, or Into a Life. I know that Travis would fucking hate me for this review, and I hope he does. I hope one day that hate bubbles over and he throws his computer into the ocean and never releases a single fucking second of his music ever again. He's done enough. He's done more than anyone else ever has with what he has. This review will probably come down relatively soon because frankly it's embarrassing, but I had to write about this album. I had to express how much it means to me. This is basically all I could ever want out of a piece of music, and the craziest thing is I've been predicting it be that since the first single came out a year ago. Ugly May never disappoints. Well, it's still up, and unless you request otherwise, I think I'm going to keep this review up here for posterity, the boy Baz. And we also have Magical Monkey. Well, I think that is safe to say that this album is a lot weirder than anyone thought it'd be. This is a departure from the Little Ugly main persona, a character that has been steadily disintegrating and falling apart since Mr. Fug Isolation. The Memphis rap iteration of LUM was always an acted role. Nobody seriously believed that Travis Miller was out here shooting up cars and dealing lean. It was a semi-ironic, tongue-in-cheek role that was probably fun to play back in 2012, but I'd imagine that it became grating and uncomfortable over time. I get the sense that Travis Miller doesn't really know who he is as an artist. He's an amazing artist, I agree, one of the best of the decade, but he's an artist lost adrift in an ADHD-esque maelstrom of different sounds, characters, backstories, aesthetic signifiers. Who is Little Ugly Mane? Some aging white dude who owns too many band t-shirts, a guy with a crippling case of the blues. It's a startling rebuke of an artistic career built upon self-invention and self-mythologization. Discomfort and disassociation are recurring themes in this album. This album makes me feel like I've been staring at my laptop for days on end. It makes me feel like all I want to do is sleep for 16 hours a day. Depression in the internet era traps you into constant loops of hell over and over again. Clicking, staring at the wall. Go to sleep. In this album, a lot of the beats have this strange quality of entrapment. I can't quite describe what I mean, but hopefully you'll get it. In Styrofoam, the beat has this strange quality that I can only describe as positively satanic. It seems to bend Little Ugly Mane singing into pantomiming its manic carnival rhythm, enslaving him. The glockenspiel loop in With Iron and Bleach and Accidents has the exact same effect, locking Little Ugly Mane into a bizarre hell, his deadpan voice forced to sing along. If parts of this album sound playful, or if it sounds like it's invoking the sounds of a children's TV show, it is because Travis Miller recognizes that there's a horrible drive towards learned helplessness, a desire to reduce oneself to an infant, a helpless little baby, when faced with turmoil and difficulty. It is also because the magical worlds of children's television seem to exist in a space outside of time. No one ever grows up, nothing ever changes. This is similar to the situation of a prolonged depression, where the days start to unhook themselves from time and you lose yourself in the nothingness. One of the strangest things about this album is that it is a late career album, and it sounds like a late career album, but it's not the late career album to the Little Ugly main persona that we know. It's the final album to some other person, some other character that we don't recognize, an alien persona. The persona of this album is alien in two ways. First of all, we don't recognize Little Ugly Mane up this close and personal. We're used to his ironic character that inhabited Mr. Fug Isolation, and it is bizarre to hear him singing earnestly about his personal life. Second of all, Little Ugly Mane doesn't recognize himself. He's a grown adult, he's 37, and he's wondering what happened to him. It's no longer cool to be depressed, it's no longer a romantic archetype. He was able to transform raw despair into post-apocalyptic horrorcore in Oblivion Access, but he's tried all the artistic tricks of the trade, and he's a little too old for that shit now. Now the depression is mundane and banal. Christ, some of the lyrics here are crushing. In Discard, he sings, "Have a tendency to promise shit that I cannot accomplish, like the energy to take the garbage out of my apartment. I'm the enemy of progress, I just want to be discarded." Yikes. I don't even know quite what to say about this verse other than it hits hard, man. And there's plenty of verses like this. Forthright, bleak lyrics that carry weight. If you're a young person right now, you pretty much assume that everyone is extremely mentally ill and deranged unless proven otherwise. Travis Miller asserts that he's no different. Up close and personal, he's about as deranged as they make him. His cuddly hellscape soundscape seems to create a universe where there's no progression, no escape, just constant death loops of decay and rot. Is this album good? Sure, it's a pretty accurate representation of what it's like to be very fucking sad in this auspicious year of 2021. Depression is in a socially distant world. Is it an album that I'll be listening to on repeat? Hell no. There's something to be said for listening to sad music so that you can relate to someone else's struggle, but there's a fine line between that and crossing over into the constant death loop. Brutal. Good stuff, Magical Monkey. And from Galactic Hole, where do you go after creating your best work? What does the man who has everything do for himself? When do you know to stop? Who are you? Who are you? Creativity is a ceaseless stream forced to collide with the more forceful yet more short-lived rapids of hype for what's next. Years of genuine people's lives traded for at best 2 hours of interest before the crowd has decided to move on to the next exhibit, repeating ad nauseum. Huh? I didn't hear you. Is it better to release one project, an infinitesimal speck in the ever-expanding universe, or too many, an immense galaxy bogged down by lack of life, or perhaps just the right stargazer turning their telescope a smidgen too far west? Ah, don't worry about it. It was nothing anyways. Eternally chasing that, okay, I'm really done this time, for real, I mean it, despite knowing it's never true. Looking back, it was kinda obvious from the start. Oh, right. A collection of blaringly loud-voiced opinions that serve nothing more than reassurance that everyone just wants to be cared about. Can we just let people do what makes them happy and shut the fuck up for once? A constant scramble to take over the mind of anyone who will listen, only for them to immediately take interest in 10 other things every minute. Does advertising really even work anymore? I hardly even know what I'm interested in anymore. Everyone else seems to have that one locked down. Maybe one day when we aren't crushed by endless menial tasks and the constant fear of doing enough just to stay alive, we'll be able to appreciate others' time in addition to our own. We're never having fun. The work is never done. Travis Miller forever. Little Ugly Mane forever. Make it a good day for yourself today. I agree with that sentiment, Galactic Hole. And one more from October 12th from Acoleutic, Acoleuthhic. What's left of death is a scrambled dream made of childhood joy and also the sadnesses and traumas of experience, and this dream sort of mingles them all together even as it fades from consciousness. What's left of death is a hymn to your own survival, that you at least got this far, that you pushed it back, that you managed to organize a delay. What's left of death is a game that others can play with your remains, and of course they can't win that game, but they can use it to make their own death games more interesting, or weird, or difficult. What's left of death is a sadness so complete it can only be glimpsed tangentially by the living, in the fractures between worlds, such as when an old Dixieland song warps, glitches out, then somehow resumes. When a completely different yearning is overlaid upon that same Dixieland impossibility in the form of an IDM keyboard line that sounds even more ancient. Or when too pretty shoegaze trip-hop frames a lyrical ugliness that begs to be saved, absolved, raised from hell, loved. But also, what's left of death is a chance to look back at it all and smile. What's left of death is the choice to go on living. I think I might leave it there.